joining us with an exploration update of Narryer Metals work, particularly in the Narryer terrain. Just some disclaimers that you can read in your own time. So just a quick snapshot on Narryer Metals. We listed in April and we raised 5 mil, which we did pretty well, I think, timing wise. Our main focus is looking for giant magmatic nickel copper PGE type deposits. They're your Novas, they're your Julimars, they're your and particularly your Voisey Bays. Our key project is in the Narryer terrain, which is along the western edge of the Gawler Craton, and it's the same kind of ground that, say, Julimar, that Chalice's discovery down near Perth. The other area which I'm quite excited about is the Gawler Craton. Again, an area that's quite underexplored, and there is evidence of multiple mafic, ultramafic intrusive complexes in this terrain, which has had not much in the way of exploration. The other good thing that we're seeing in particularly these two terrains is rare earth opportunity, and some people might have heard of Krakatoa's recent Mount Clare discovery up in the Narryer. We're in similar geology to that, and another company, Petrotherm, have also found quite significant discovery of rare earths, ionic rare earths in the Gawler Craton at their Comet discovery. So we've got very similar kind of areas, and we think there's also a pretty good rare earth opportunity for us. We have an experienced board and technical team, but the thing today I want to talk about is the main bit of work that we've been doing since listing, and that's our EM survey over our Mt Nairn area, and we've been lucky enough to find some multiple conductors relating to ultramafic complexes or intrusives, and we might walk through those a little bit today, and then the plan is we're heading out in the field tomorrow. We're getting ready to drill for July, August. Just a quick brush over the board. We've got a fairly experienced board. Richard Bevan, who used to be the chairman of Cassini, the managing director of Cassini. He's chairman of Narryer. Phil Warren from Grange Consulting. They look after a lot of our corporate. Myself, I'm a geologist with over 20 years experience in economic geology. I've worked in previous companies exploring for nickel. The projects came out of the stables with myself of the Amaras, the quite well-known prospecting family in Perth, and Damon is actually on the board as well as a non-exec director. And I have great backup with Jane Crawford, who's our general manager of corporate. So why look in the Narryer terrain? This is a large igneous province which sits on the edge of an ancient craton, and these are the kind of places where you find these big nickel copper PGE deposits. We know that. We're also near very large deep penetrating faults that go down to the mantle, and we see evidence of these intrusives, mafic, ultramafic intrusives. We see evidence also of nickel copper sulfides, and we know that there's country rock there that can supply the sulfur. We're not the only people that recognise that that the Narryer terrain is actually a good place to look for nickel copper PGEs. Chalice has pegged surrounding us. Desert Metals have been working. They listed about a year before us, and they've been working fairly hard on some of their prospects to the north of us. And some of those prospects, such as Induendi, are actually along strike from where we are, and we have very similar rocks. the one thing I guess that's also came out in the last, particularly the last 3 or 4 months, is the rare earth opportunity. Krakatoa Resources have actually made quite a significant discovery with their ionic clay-hosted rare earths at Mount Clair, and we have, I think, very similar geology to that. And following that up again is Desert Metals, who have also found rare earths relating to their Indoendi prospect. So we think that the Narryer terrain has been underexplored in the past, and we think this is a terrain that's not only good for nickel copper PGE, but we also see rare earth opportunity. So just getting on to the projects. So we've got 2 key project areas that we picked fairly early on in the piece, in the pegging rush that occurred up in the Narryer terrain. Our main focus, which we'll probably talk more about today, is our Mt Nairn project, which is a 1,200 square k's of ground. It's quite a significant holding in the area. We know from previous mapping done by the GS survey and previous explorers that we know that there's mafic, ultramafic intrusives evident there in outcrop, and also we can determine that from interpretation of the magnetics. The thing is, most of the exploration for nickel copper PGEs, or particularly nickel copper, and there hasn't really been much PGE exploration, was during the 60s and 70s, during that nickel boom. And once they found nickel in the eastern Yilgarn, a lot of the focus actually went to that area, leaving this area still fairly untouched. But the work that was done there has actually shown that there is quite prospective rocks. So we're kind of targeting your Nova Bollinger style mineralisation. The area is quite structurally complicated, and it also is quite high metamorphism, very similar to the Albany Fraser, and very similar to the western, the southwest terrain of the Yilgarn, where Julimar sits. The other kind of target we're looking at, which we've identified quite a large mafic, ultramafic complex there, is layered PGEs relating to chromite bands, very similar to the Panchen Sill, and I guess to a degree, the best known one is the Bushveld complex. But the thing that we're quite excited about at the moment, though, is our results that have just come back from our airborne EM survey that was done over the Mt Nairn area, where we've actually found some nice bedrock conductors. So tomorrow I'm heading up there to actually do a bit of a field check of some of these anomalies and actually start planning the drilling, which we hope will happen in the next couple of months. In conjunction with that, we're also doing some stream sediments, which is a technique that has kind of lost a lot of favour, I guess, the last 10, 20, 30 years, but was used a lot in the 60s and 70s, and would be very effective in this kind of area. And we're using that for looking for PGEs and also looking for rare earths. So we actually identified, this is just our milli trend, which is an area where we've seen mafic, ultramafics in outcrop associated with banded irons. There's been historic nickel up to over 0.5%, and the area's never been drilled, never really been tested, and it's over 20 k's in strike. We flew, the main focus was to fly the survey over this area. So we used the Excite system, which has been successfully used in the area already, looking at looking for massive sulfides, and has successfully found massive sulfides in other areas in the Narryer. We've got 13 anomalies, but we've got in that milli trend, but the main focus has been these 5 key targets that seem to be associated with mafic, ultramafics, or in the magnetics would suggest that they're ultramafics. So basically, the EM, what it's looking for is massive sulfides, and massive sulfides come out quite significantly as an anomaly in an electromagnetic survey. There are other things that could do that, but in the case of this project, we're fairly keen or fairly positive that what we're seeing here are massive sulfides. Whether those massive sulfides have nickel, that's the next part of the story, and that's what we need to drill. So this is just an example of some of the work that we've kind of been doing and some of the follow-up that we'll be doing. So this map here you can see is from is basically we've digitally captured some old historic mapping done in the 1960s of the milli trend, and we've also captured some of the rock chips. And what we've found is in this particular anomaly, MNC07, it's 700 meters of strike, and that actually follows the ultramafics, which is a fairly good sign. So we'll be heading out there and having a look at that this week. The other area, which is to the north of kind of and to the west of the milli trend area is the Irides Area, which is a long strike from Irides Hill and in the Indowendi prospect of Desert Metals. Now, Indowendi has had some quite successful drilling. It's early days, but they've shown PGE, quite anomalous PGEs over quite a large area, and also evidence of high nickel and copper in some of their RAB drilling. Now, if you follow the magnetic trend along there, you get to Irides Hill, and then from Irides Hill, you kind of get into our ground. Now, there was some early drilling done in the early 2000s. Historic drilling that was actually targeting nickel sulfides and was quite successful in finding ultramafics and quite anomalous copper. 4 meters at 0.12% copper and 73 meters at 0.1 nickel in ultramafics. Now, we've got an EM anomaly that actually follows a long strike from that drilling. So we think that's a fairly exciting place to start looking. The other area that we've got in this slide is the CN2 prospect. This is an area that's quite subdued magnetics. It shows mafic ultramafics, kind of subcropping, anomalous nickel in the rock chipping. There was a small historic VTEM survey done in the area, and there was a bedrock anomaly found coincidental with the mag high. This was never really followed up, but what's quite exciting is that our survey to the north of the previous VTEM survey has actually extended the strike of this anomaly, and we think this is quite an exciting prospect to hit. This is a little bit different. This is to the south of the milli area that we've just been looking at. And this is an area that we've recently flown a 100-meter spaced mag survey to get a better picture of what it looks like. But it's a attackable well area, which basically we're targeting PGEs associated with chromite layering in a large mafic ultramafic complex. And we think that is quite a large complex. It's about 20 Ks in strike and very little in the way of exploration that has occurred. During the 70s, and I don't know how or why they targeted this particular area, but there was a series of RAB holes done across a mag high and identified some chromite and some ultramafics. Those chromite bands, meter at 3% chrome. There were several bands identified. There was also evidence of disseminated copper sulfides in the footwall in gabbros, and there was evidence of layered mafic ultramafics in some of the other drilling. So this is a kind of a target area that we're looking for layered, basically PGEs associated with chromite bands, very similar to what you see at the Panton Sill, which is up in the Kimberley, and also the Bushveld. Now, that early drilling, which unfortunately there is no more samples from, failed to do any PGE analysis on. So we have this 20K strike of prospect with untested PGEs on a very large complex, and we're pretty excited about that. So one of the key things we'll do once we get the drill rig out while we're drilling the EM anomalies is to actually come and re-drill some of these holes that actually found chromite to see, and then we'll do a full suite of PGEs and see whether there's actually PGEs associated with these. Not only is there PGEs, I guess, associated with these kind of deposits, but also there's also a nickel copper component that we'll also explore in these areas. Now we're getting now to South Australia, which, as I said before, we picked this ground because we thought it was quite exciting. It's underexplored. A lot of it's covered by thin sand cover, so you know there's not much in the way of outcrop. A lot of focus in the area in the past, particularly down in the southern Gawler Craton, which is where the main focus has been on mineral sands. Iluka, for example, has held this ground up a fair bit over the years. But underneath the sand, there's quite a great story in regards to mafic, ultramafic complexes from a variety of different geological periods. And the limited bedrock exploration that has occurred there has shown evidence that there is nickel sulfides, there is PGEs, and we're pretty excited about doing some really great grassroots exploration on a project that we think has got some great merit. We're not kind of the only people that think that the southern and western Gawler is prospective. One of the main exploration areas for western areas has been the edge of the western Gawler. They've spent a lot of money in the past. We kind of think that we have very similar prospectivity in our areas. One of the key areas we have is Cooper Hill. This has had previous RAB drilling that's shown quite elevated PGEs over a very large space, vertical drilling kind of program, 400 by 400 spaced. We're going to come back in there and re-drill, particularly along strike, and see whether we can kind of bring that target and define that target a hell of a lot better in the coming, probably by the end of the year. We'll have a RAB rig in there. We're also, you know, lightning strikes twice. Not only has there been fairly significant rare earth discovery in the Narryer with Krakatoa's Mount Clare, but a week later, after we listed, Petrotherm had also made quite a significant discovery of ionic rare earths in the Gawler Craton at their Comet discovery, which is only about 20 Ks from our Sturt project that kind of sits in the central Gawler there. It's very similar geology, very high grades for these ionic rare earths. So the advantage of and you know, just a brief discussion on ionic rare earths. So they basically, the rare earths you get in the laterite, or in the regolith, in the saprolites. The advantage of these is that you can have them lower grade than your conventional deposits, because it's near the surface. You're taking it from clays that are quite easy to mine. And the other big advantage is the processing is a hell of a lot cheaper, and you don't have the nasties like your uranium and thorium that you have to deal with in your tailings. So there's been a lot of focus on these styles of rare earths, and this is probably the future of rare earths in Australia if we can get the metallurgy right. But we think the Gawler Craton is actually the place also to look for these styles of deposits. So much so is that we've actually picked up we've also picked up another 1,400 square kilometres of ground, particularly surrounding our Ceduna project. And why we did that was, the thing about South Australian Mines Department, when you drill holes, particularly if they've partly funded it, is that they take the material, and that material gets stored at the core library there. So in the case of our project areas in South Australia, there is over 400 drill holes sitting in the core library, never been tested for rare earths. And we've actually picked up additional ground that had almost 190 drill holes, and those 190 drill holes were targeting heavy minerals, and a lot of that was never even assayed. So, and basically what we'll be doing is getting into the core yard with our handheld XRF, and we'll be looking for anomalous rare earths in the saprolite, and if we find some, we'll go do some more assays, and we'll probably go out and drill around those targets and try and better define the areas that we're looking at. So just in summing up, getting close to finishing this off today, we're going to be actively getting out in the field starting tomorrow. I'm packing the ute, getting everything together. We're going to go out and have a look at some of these EM anomalies, and basically put the pegs in the ground and get ready to drill. We're sorting out some heritage surveys, and we'll be sorting out some rigs. While we're also doing that, we're using, we're also going to start a stream sediment program around particularly our Milli area, where I think there's quite prospective areas for not only PGEs, but for rare earths. Now, the early stage exploration for not only for PGEs, but we're quite effective using streams around that Gawler area very early on in the piece, looking at PGEs and coarse fraction. But also what's quite interesting is the methodology of exploration done by Krakatoa in looking for their rare earth discovery at Mount Clare. Was to early stage was to actually use streams to vector in on where they should put their drilling. So we're kind of doing the same thing here at our Mt Nairn Milli prospect area. So once we've got some, once we've basically sorted out once we've got our drill rigs sorted, we'll get out there and start drilling the EM targets probably around late July, early August. And we'll also tackle the tackable well chromites to look for the PGEs in that same area. The Ceduna and Sturt project, we'll over the next few months, we'll actually start testing some of these drill holes that are stored at the SA core library, which, you know, it's a great cost-saving exercise. It's not even, you don't even have to go out in the field. Comfortable air-conditioned core yard in Adelaide, and we'll sit through and get through some of those samples and start trying to vector in maybe some new rare earth areas. And then finally, RAB drilling. Once we kind of figure out our targets in South Australia with rare earths, we'll get in with a RAB rig and start drilling some holes there, and then also tackle the PGE targets at Cooper Hill. Now, thanks for joining us today.